Start, can we please ask those people who are outside, especially the youngsters, to please come inside, and those of the youngsters who are sitting in the back, please come in the front. Ya Allah, you don't need to sit on the chairs or on leaning on the walls. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. But before we begin the speech tonight, I just have a quick word of request for everyone. You know, when you come to the majalis of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein during this month, these majalises where we do the zikr, the remembrance of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam, is equivalent to the act of worship. It is ibadah. And the ihtiram of ibadah is that you don't talk. You know, there was a lot of talking that was going on yesterday during my speech and during the speech of the Sayyid. And this is really against the rules of sitting in the majlis. Now, if there is any disturbance, you are disturbing other people who wish to listen. And also, you create an atmosphere that is very unpleasant. And out of disrespect, you are disrespecting the majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu. So this is my request, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad wa ali. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين واللعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، قال حسين بن علي: وإني لم أخرج أشيرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما، وإني خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي، أريد أن أمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير سيرة جدي وأبي علي بن أبي طالب. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the last 2 nights, we discussed aspects of the history of Karbala, and in that we discussed the departure of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam and the reasons for his departure from Medina and heading towards Mecca. And we also discussed some of the events that took place while he was in Mecca, where he had arrived there on the 3rd of Sha'ban, and his presence in Mecca in 60 AH was approximately from the 3rd of Sha'ban, according to some riwayat, until the 7th of Dhul Hajj, in some riwayat, the 8th of Dhul Hajj. So there is a span of time that Imam is spending and is staying in Mecca. Now, we talked about the mission of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam and the mission statement of Imam Hussein, that I am not leaving Medina for the sake of creating any kind of revolution, to create any kind of sedition, to create any kind of fight. I am not seeking any power by myself or for myself. I am not seeking to create any situation of war. I am leaving because now my mission is this, that I want to create reformation of the religion of Islam, and through implication, this means that Islam was damaged. Islam was hurting. People had lost the essence of the religion to the extent that it had become just something that everybody was following without really engaging their hearts in the religion itself. To the extent that they had become those who were willing to pay allegiance to someone who had the reputation of being a drunkard, someone who had the reputation of being a womanizer, to someone who had the reputation of even saying and declining any aspects of the mission of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. He had determined that death was certain. There is no escaping the fact that he was going to be assassinated, that he was going to be murdered. This was something very clear, that if he does not pay allegiance to Yazid, he is going to be martyred. He is going to be assassinated. Maybe even in his mind was the fact that even after paying allegiance, as Imam Hassan alayhi salatu wasalam, after signing the treaty with Muawiyah, ended up getting poisoned by Muawiyah, that even after accepting the allegiance of Yazid, perhaps there is no safety for him. Because the track record of the Bani Umayyah was such that even after you do what they say, they still have enmity towards the Ahlul Bayt, and they will try to find a way to assassinate Imam Hussein. So he had to plan a strategy, a plan in which his death would be an event in such a way that it would create a revolution, and it would create the revival. It would arouse the people and cause people to start thinking where haqq is and where batil is. And hopefully through that, they will reform themselves. So this was one of the missions. And Imam also further states, that أُرِيدُ أَنْ أَمْرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفَ وَأَنْهَى عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, that I am going to enjoin good, and I am going to create where evil is going to be prevented, and I am going to re-establish the sunnah, the traditions of the Holy Prophet and his father Ali ibn Abi Talib. So this was his mission statement. But in order to do so, his death would have to create this kind of an impact. So the first thing he did was he left Medina. And when he left Medina, there are descriptions of what people were saying in Medina, that the departure of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein from Medina was as if it was like the day that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed away. The sadness that the people felt was as if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had died. Then he goes to Makkah. Now while he was in Makkah, people came around Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They came, they spoke with him, they learned from him. He was a religious guide, and people respected him. They came to meet him in the Haram. And as it was the ways of those time, when he knew that the enemy was seeking his death and they were going after him, Imam Hussein alayhi salam had some informants that were roaming around Makkah who were informing him of what was going on. And one of the information that he was getting is that Yazid has sent people into Makkah through the governor of Makkah, and the plan to assassinate him was going to occur even if it was going to be in the precincts of the Haram itself. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam had made up his mind, because people came to him and they were talking to him and saying to him that in Makkah you are safe. And Imam knew that that was not the case. And when he made the decision that I am going to now depart from Makkah and head towards Iraq, because the letters were coming from Kufa, that, Ya Imam, we don't like Yazid ibn Muawiyah who has taken over, please come to us. We will rally behind you, and we will form an army, and we will create this resistance against the Banu Umayyah. So Imam had to answer to these letters, and he had to make some decisions. But when the people came to him and advised him not to leave Makkah, one of the profound statements that Imam Hussein alayhi salam made was that I do not want any bloodshed near the Haram, because it would disrespect the sanctity of the Haram. He loved being in the Haram, of course. No, who would not want to be in Makkah near the Kaaba? He loved to be there. But he said, I do not want any disrespect to occur to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by my bloodshed, because this is going to be imminent. It's coming. Now, one of the people that went to advise him was Abdullah bin Zubair, the same guy whose allegiance Yazid was also seeking. He had traveled to Mecca, whether he was with the Imam or separately, I don't know, but he was in Mecca. And he came to Imam. Now, Abdullah bin Zubair, while he was pretending to be a good, willing person against, towards the Imam and advising him to stay in Mecca, he said to Imam that, we will rally the people in Mecca and we will all pay allegiance to you, and you can create your resistance from the presence of Mecca. Abdullah ibn Zubair, in his heart of hearts, in his mind, was kind of happy that Imam Hussein had made the decision to leave. Why? Because while the Imam was in Mecca, nobody was paying any attention to Abdullah bin Zubair, although he was one of the respected people. So he had surmised in his mind that when Imam ﷺ leaves Mecca, people will rally around him, and we see in the future of the history that Abdullah ibn Zubair, in fact, does take the allegiance of the people and takes over the leadership of Mecca, a discussion for another time. Another person that sent advice to Imam Hussein was Abdullah bin Ja'far, the husband of Sayyida Zainab. He wrote a letter to the Imam, and actually he even visited him in Mecca during one of the nights and said, "Ya Imam, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, this is the place of safety, don't leave." It seemed from the narrations that Abdullah bin Ja'far had some influence with the rulers. Amr bin As in Mecca, who was the governor at that time, says, "I will ask him to give you amnesty. And he will, through my request, he will honor it." And Imam realized that, no, that's not going to be the case. And he's told Abdullah bin Ja'far, say, I understand your advice, but my mind is still made, and I am destined. He even talks about a dream that he had, that I am destined to leave from Mecca, and I have to leave. So, on the 7th of Dhul Hajj, now I want you to picture this. People from all over had come to Mecca to perform Hajj. This is the Hajj season. So the gathering in Mecca was getting larger and larger and larger. And those people who recognized the Imam, and also after having spoken with the other people of Mecca, knew that the grandson of the Prophet was in Mecca. So one of these strategies that came into play here, that when Imam in the season of Hajj makes the decision to leave Mecca and not perform the Hajj, was going to create some kind of a question. What's going on? The grandson of the Prophet is leaving the presence of Mecca while there is an opportunity for him to perform the Hajj. And hopefully these types of situations will create questions in the mind of people. Why? So this was another aspect of Imam's mission and strategy, to create this arousal in the conscience of the people that if he, the Imam, the grandson of the Prophet, was going to leave Mecca during the time of Hajj, there has to be a reason. And, so Imam left. Now, many narrations say that he had already worn the clothes of the Ihram to go and perform the Hajj, and he changed his niyat from Hajj to Umrah, and, before he left. There are many scholars who argue against this. They said that the fiqhi mas'ala that is associated with what happens after you worn the ihram becomes a little bit fuzzy, and many of them said they don't think that Imam had made the niyyah for Hajj. So, that is a fiqhi masala. I don't want to dwell into it, but I just wanted to point this out, that there are people who will say that he did not make the niyyah for Hajj, but he did deliver sermons in the presence of Mecca to the people. And, basically what he was saying, to the people, that he is leaving Mecca and, the reasons why he was leaving. He gave us, some sort of a speech about that. So on the 7th of Dhul Hajj, in some narration on the 8th of Dhul Hajj, Imam departed from Mecca. And at a certain distance after he had traveled for, a few hours, news reached the governor of Mecca, Amr bin As, Abdullah ibn Sa'id al-As, And he was told that Imam has already left Makkah and is headed towards Iraq. So Amr tells his brother to gather a few troops and go and go and attack the Imam and bring him back to Makkah. One narration says that when they reached the area where today Masjid al-Tan'im is, which is by car about a half an hour drive to the Haram. In those days they were riding horses and were going in the camels. So when they reached that place, the army with Yahya ibn As, arrived there, and they attacked the army of the Imam. And the Imam, at that time, all the youngsters, Bani Hashim, were there, and they resisted. There was a skirmish, and they were able to resist. And Yahya basically returned back to Makkah, and Imam alayhi salatu wasalam continued on his journey. Walid ibn Utbah in Medina also got the news that Imam had left Makkah. And the governor of Makkah also, Amr bin As, once he said that Imam has already left, they wrote a letter. Walid ibn Utbah wrote to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and Yazid, and Amr also wrote to them and said that Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam has left Makkah now and he's heading towards Kufa. So when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad received this letter, he sent troops out all over different parts of Iraq to create a siege and to block the routes of the Imam. So they had gone and occupied certain towns, certain villages, and the roads that headed towards Makkah. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam started this journey towards Kufa. On the way, they come to a place. Now there's many stations that they arrive, and I don't have the time to go through all of them, but I just want to highlight some of the things that happened. Abdullah bin Ja'far, the husband of Sayyida Zainab, again made another attempt to try and convince Imam not to go. So he again went to the Imam, offered him amnesty that he was going to try and negotiate, with the governor of Makkah. And with him were his two sons, Aun and Muhammad. They joined over there, and when Imam alayhi salatu wasalam again refused that, no, I'm going to continue, Aun and Muhammad, the two sons of Abdullah bin Ja'far and Sayyida Zainab, stayed with the Imam, and Abdullah bin Ja'far basically returned back, and because he was a businessman, he had to take care of other things, and he left. Imam again continued on his journey. Now, he was traveling at a fairly slow pace because Hajj now had already started, and by the 12th of Zil Hajj, Hajj had finished, and people who had performed their Hajj now were beginning to start to go home. And one of those people that had left the Hajj and he was headed towards Iraq was Zuhair ibn Qayn. On the way to Iraq, there was a caravan of people that was the caravan of Zuhair ibn Qayn, and on one side was the caravan of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and they were traveling together, and at some point they camped, they stopped. Imam asked one of his children, who is in that camp that is over there? So somebody told him, this is Zuhair ibn Qayn. Now who is Zuhair ibn Qayn? Now here, I just want us to focus on something which is the functional role of the Imam. When we recite Ayatul Kursi and other places in the Quran, we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides people from darkness into light. Min al-dhulumati ila nur. Imam asks, who is this person? And he was told that it was Zuhair ibn Qayn. Zuhair ibn Qayn was an Uthmani. He was the follower of the second caliph, and he was one of those people who had joined the army of Muawiyah to seek revenge against the mother of Uthman. So he was not a person who was associated with the Ahlul Bayt. So when he was asked, he was summoned to come and meet the Imam, initially Zuhair ibn Qayn refuses. He says, no, I'm not going to go. His wife stands up and he says, oh Zuhair, the grandson of the Prophet is asking you for his audience. How dare you refuse? Go and speak with him. So Zuhair ibn Qayn goes, and he goes and meets with the Imam. We don't know what the Imam said to him. But we know what ended up happening after that, because Zuhair ibn Qayn came back to his own camp. He told his wife that I am releasing you, I am freeing you. And because now I am going to join the army of Imam Hussein, and I am going to sacrifice my life. There was a light, according to the descriptions, there was a light on his face with whatever conversation that he had with the Imam, that he was convinced now that Haqq was with Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. He was completely convinced of that. And Zuhair ibn Qayn became one of the most valiant soldiers on the day of Ashura. And if we have the chance, we will discuss the speech that he gave on the eve of Ashura, when Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam had offered people to leave. Imam Hussein alayhi salam continues on this journey. At one point, he sends a messenger by the name of Qais ibn Musahir to Kufa. And he basically gives him a letter and says, take it to the leaders of Kufa and tell them that I am on my way. You have wrote all these letters to me, and now I am coming, so prepare for my arrival. So Qais leaves the caravan and he heads out, towards Kufa. And since the troops of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad were surrounding all of these areas, he was captured. And when they went and they caught up with him, Qais bin Musahir had a letter with him, so he tore it up and he threw it away. And he was captured, and the pieces of the letter that he had with him and him were taken back to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And he was confronted by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Says, who are you and where are you coming from? So he says, I am coming from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I have a letter. And so what was in the letter? He says, it was a letter for which I don't want to tell you what it is. So who are you delivering it to? And I said, I don't know myself who the people are. I was going to deliver it to someone. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad offers him two options. He says to him that either I kill you right now, or I want you to ascend this pulpit and curse Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and then I will let you free. So Qais ibn Musayr says, no, I will go on the pulpit. He chooses the second option. And he goes up onto the pulpit, and now people had gathered around there in Kufa, and he addresses the people. And he tells them that you have all decided now to pay allegiance to one of the worst of the people here. And he curses Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad that he is one of the worst of the people. I come to you from Hussein ibn Ali, who is the salvation for for all of you. The plan that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad had to go and have somebody go up and curse Imam Hussein alayhi salam failed. So Qais was brought back down from the pulpit, and he was immediately beheaded. There is another person, Abdullah bin Yaqtar, who also faced the same fate as Qais ibn Musayr. He was an ambassador that was sent by Imam to inquire about Muslim ibn Aqil, and he ended up basically also facing the same situation. Now I ask you, my dear brothers and sisters, that Iman that we claim that we have, is it just saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah Aliyun Waliyullah and it's done? Or is there more to it? Because it's easy for us to follow anything, when we are not challenged. We claim to be Muslims. We claim to be Shi'an Ali. In fact, we will shout on the loudest. I kind of recited that yesterday, Labbaik ya Hussein. But do we mean it? These two people were like you and I. They were not ma'soom. They were not of any, even considered the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But their commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam was such that they were willing to give up their lives for Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. So when we look at it, the Shuhada of Karbala on the day of Ashura, we will talk about those people at one point in time. But even during the travels of Imam Hussein alayhi salam from Mecca towards Kufa, you find that they are individuals, these gems of mu'mineen, who are also finding shahadat, who are also finding martyrdom, in the way. At some point, they reached one of the camps. I think it was called the camp of Sharaf or Sharif. There's a water supply over there, and Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam asks the people, his people, to try and get as much water supply as they possibly can get, because they had a long journey ahead of them. So the people, gather all of the water, and they continue, on to, in their journey. At one point in time, the news of Muslim ibn Aqil's shahadat arrives. When the messengers that were sent that Muslim ibn Aqil had requested arrives to Imam Hussein and delivers the news of the passing away. They said that Abdullah bin Yaqtar had been martyred, Hani ibn Urwa had been martyred, and Muslim ibn Aqil had been martyred. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam was now, he knew basically what was happening in Kufa. But he was resolved. He wanted to continue on this journey. So when they arrive at this place known as the Husn, the name of the place is really not that important. One of the companions was looking out into the distance, and they see a cloud of dust that was rising into the arid desert. One of them said, this maybe, it says Allahu Akbar. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam asked him, why are you saying takbir? He says, I see some palm trees. And when Imam looked at that side, he says, this looked like they are horsemen that are coming. Eventually, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, goes towards a point where he says, let's find a place where we can defend ourselves, because this is not like just a bunch of people. It looks like there's a lot of horsemen that are headed towards me. So they observe a defensive posture, and the army of 1,000 people led by Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi arrive to Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Hur has commanded by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to capture Imam Hussein alayhi salam and bring him to Kufa. So he comes, they meet somewhere in the late morning time. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, there is a cordial greeting between them, and they speak a little bit. Imam Hussein alayhi salam recognizes that the army of Hur, the people in the army, were thirsty. Their horses looked tired. So Imam immediately orders his people to give water to the army of Hur. 1,000 people. They all quenched their thirst. Water was even given to the horses. In one narration, they says that the hooves of the horses, which had become really hot from the desert, the water was being poured on the hooves of these horses to cool the animals off. These are the disciplines of the Ahl Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. My dear brothers and sisters, learn from this. You and I. We need to really live it. It's not a story. Extract things from this story. That in the arid desert, when water is a valuable commodity, Imam was distributing not to only other human beings, but also to animals, and making sure that their quenches were. There's one narration, one of the people was having a hard time to drink, and Imam himself takes the satchel towards this person, and he brings it down, and he's trying to give it to him. The opening of the water skin was so wide that the person couldn't even drink. So Imam wraps it up and makes it small enough so that that person could quench his thirst. Personal service to a member of the troop of an enemy. This was our Imam. So the conversation between him and Hur takes place. It's time for Salatul Zuhr. The azan is given. Imam tells Hur that if you want, you can lead the salah for your troops, and I will lead the salah for my people. Hur refuses. He says, Ya Abna Rasulullah, how can I lead namaz when you are there? So the army of Hur, along with the people that were there with Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, prayed Salatul Zuhr with the imamat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They all prayed behind him. On one side, they have come to capture him and take him to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. But on another side of their minds, they recognize the position of the Imam to the extent that they pray behind him. Leading somebody to pray behind somebody is not a small thing. And the respect of the Imam was such that all 1,000 people of the army of Hur also prayed namaz behind him. So there was a moment of Sunday. Again, the time of Asr comes, and they also again recite namaz behind the Imam. Khair. Conversation between Hur and Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam started to take place. And he says, what do you want? Imam asks Hur. So Hur said, I have been ordered by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to detain you and to take you back to Kufa, towards him. So Imam said, look, I'm not here on my own will. I'm not coming because I'm just roaming in the desert. I have actually been requested by the people of Kufa. They have written letters to me and asked me to come. That's why I'm coming to Kufa. I have no other intention. So Hur says, I know of no such letters. So Imam orders one of his people and says, bring that satchel in which you have all of these letters. So this big bag is brought. He says, here are all the letters that were written to me by the people of Kufa. So look at this. So Hur said, I don't know about any of these things. All I know is I'm following the orders of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, and I cannot let you. Imam said, listen, if you don't want me to, I don't want to go to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. He refuses. So I'll return back to Makkah. And Hur says, no, you cannot return back to Makkah. So Imam said, if you don't want me to go back to Makkah, we are at a standstill here. There's nothing else to do. So Hur offers Imam another way. Before that, and this is one point I kind of forgot to mention about, when the Imam, when these conversations were starting to take place, Imam asked his people, says, okay, everybody, get on your horses, and we are going to leave this camp, and we are going to leave from here. So when they started to mount their horses, Hur came and held the reins of the horse on which Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam was, and he stopped him. He says, no, you're not going anywhere. Imam says some words to Hur. He says, may your mother weep over you. This was like a curse, He says, may your mother weep over you. May your mother cry over you. What was Hur's response? Hur says that, Yabna Rasulullah, if there was anybody else that had said these words to me, I would have taken care of this issue. But he says, what can I do? I cannot say anything against your mother, recognizing the status of Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I cannot say about your mother what you have said about my mother. It behoves me. Imam Hussain said, then what do you want me to do? So Hur makes a proposal. He says, okay, I won't take you towards Kufa, but I'm also not going to let you go back to Medina. So we're going to go in a direction which is neither of these ways. And I'm going to write a letter to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, and I'm going to seek his advice to see what he wants me to do. So they say, okay. So they start riding towards Karbala, basically. They started riding towards this place of Iraq. And Hur and Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam were sort of riding kind of together. The letter had gone to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad about what it is that needs to be done. Imam recognized one thing about Hur. When Hur, first of all, prayed behind the Imam, and where Hur recognized the status of Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha, Imam recognized that there is still a little light that is dim, but it's still in the place of the heart of Hur. So as they were traveling towards Karbala, Hur and Imam Hussain were having these conversations, and Imam Hussain was talking to him. We will leave the conversation aside for now, but it can be surmised that there was probably words of hidayah towards Hur. But Hur was the commander of the army of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, and he had to follow orders. A letter comes to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, and the orders of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to Hur was basically that stop at a place in the middle of the desert where there is nothing the water supply is very scant, and there is no dwelling, there's not too many people living there, and stopped the Imam at this location. It so happened that this location was the location and the land of Karbala as we know it today. The army of Imam Hussein, on the 2nd of Muharram, the army, Imam Hussein ﷺ, arrived in Karbala. About 27th or 28th of Zilhaj, which is just a few days before 2nd of Muharram, is when Hur stopped the Imam Hussein ﷺ. And the day of Ashura was just 2nd of Muharram, so it was 8 days away. So in a period of about 2 weeks, we all know what happened to Hur. Okay, Hur was a personality that went from somebody who was basically responsible for bringing Imam to Karbala. From that, he became one of the most prominent shuhada of Karbala. Why? Because ila zulumati, ila nur, from Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. So on the day of Ashura, I'm going to just skip ahead, inshallah, we will talk about more of this journey and what happens later on. Hur was in the camp of Umar Asad and in the army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Umar Asad now is the commander of the army. And the discussions were going on, and Hur was beginning to realize that these people are serious. They actually want to kill Imam Hussein. He was hoping that some things would happen and discussions would happen and negotiations would happen where the martyrdom and the killing of Imam Hussein ﷺ would be avoided. And when he realized that this was not the case, narrations say that on the eve of Ashura or just before the dawn of Ashura, when the people in the army of Umar Asad saw Hur was shaking. He was pale. He was frightened. Something in him had woken up. One of the people came to Hur and he says, "Oh Hur, you have a reputation of being one of these most prominent commanders, a great soldier. You are afraid of these 70, 80 people that are in the camp of Imam Hussein? You know, are you that much of a coward?" Hur said, No, I'm not a coward. Today, I am finding myself making a decision between the fire of hell and paradise. I'm stuck in between this. On one hand is the camp of the grandson of the Holy Prophet, and on the other camp is this camp of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, of Umar ibn Sa'd, of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And they are imminent, they are prominent, they want to kill Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. This became something of a very serious decision for her. Had parts of the night pass, and some narrations say that in the morning, just before dawn, Hur went from the camp of Yazid, from the camp of Umar Asad, and rode towards the camp of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Some narration said that he took 30 out of those 1,000 people that were with him. They joined him also. That's history. Some say yes, some say no. Doesn't matter. But Hur, he went. Now, this is now another situation, my dear brothers and sisters, from which we get to learn. The sin that Hur had committed here of bringing Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, the beloved of Fatima to Zahra, and he had brought him and blocked his way and brought him basically to the land of his death. Can that sin ever be overcome with anything? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, La taqnutu min rahmatillah, that do not despair of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, and Hur, when he rode towards Imam Hussein, it is said that his hands were tied behind his back. He was really ashamed. And he goes to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and he asks for forgiveness. Imam lifts Hur up and he says, Hur, yes, I have forgiven you. You know, for the lack of time, my dear brothers and sisters, I cannot go through the entire Masa'ib, but it is said that Hur was one of these soldiers that fought. He was one of the first shaheed on the day of Karbala. And when Imam Hussein ﷺ went to his body and he addressed his body, Anta hurrun fid dunya wal akhirah. Oh Hur, you have been freed from this world and also in the next world. You have basically ascended the loftiest of position. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the guidance, inshaAllah, to learn from the lessons of Karbala and benefit, from it. Let my dear brothers and sisters, let us consider this ibadat that we are having here of the zikr of Ahlul Bayt, and take it seriously. Let us, really pay attention. Sayyid will come to the mimbar right now and address us. If there is any talking, if the children are crying, take them outside. Let us, participate in these days of Azza of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shakil. بزرگ فلسفه قتل شاهدین این است که مرگ سرخ به از زندگی ننگین است. نه ظلم کن به کسی، نه به زیر ظلم برو، که این مرام حسین است و منطق دین است. از جناب حجت الاسلام و المسلمین دکتر سید جواد سجادی خواهش میکنیم که بروی منبر تشریف بیارن با ذکر صلوات بر محمد و آل محمد.
جهت خوشنودی ارواح طیبه انبیا، اولیاء، صلحاء، شهدا، اموات جمع حاضر، رحم الله لمن قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أفوض أمري إلى الله، إن الله بصير بالعباد. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل، نعم المولى ونعم النصير. باسم رب الشهداء والصديقين، قاسم الجبارين ومبير الظالمين، والحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين، والعاقبة لأهل التقوى واليقين. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ونبينا وطبيب نفوسنا، رحمة للعالمين، أبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أرواح أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين الهداة المهديين. والسلام علينا وعلى جميع عباد الله الصالحين. وأما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في القرآن الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل على رمز قرآن از حسین آموختیم. رمز قرآن از حسین آموختیم. زاتش او شعله ها اندوختیم. در زمین کربلا بارید و رفت. لاله در ویرانه ها کارید و رفت. خون او تفسیر این اسرار کرد. خون او تفسیر این اسرار کرد. ملت خوابیده را بیدار کرد. صلی الله علیک یا ابا عبدالله. صلی الله علیک یا مولاي وابن مولاي. صلی الله علیک یا رحمت الله الواسعة و یا باب نجات الأمة. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. خوشنودی ارواح طیبه شهدای کربلا، قافل سالار شهدا ابا عبدالله الحسین. بلند صلوات. اللهم صل علی محضر ارجمند همه شما خواهران و برادران، اندیشمندان، فرزانگان، جوانان عزیز، نوجوانان گرانقدرمان، عرض ارادت دارم و سلام علیکم و رحمت الله و برکاته. در شبهای گذشته در رابطه با چرایی و فلسفه و حکمت برگزاری مراسم و مجالس حسینی در ماه محرم قدری صحبت کردیم و مخصوصا در رابطه با این که برگزاری چنین مجالس چه دستاوردها و چه آثار و برکاتی در زندگی ما دارد. و همچنان شب گذشته در رابطه با این مهم که واقعاً هدف ما چیست از جمع شدن در مجالس ابا عبدالله الحسین و منظور و مقصد از این سوگواری و این عزاداری و این جمع شدن و برپایی شاعر حسینی چیست. دریافتیم که امام حسین علیه السلام با این حرکت و این نهضتش و ادعای بلند الهیش به منظور اصلاح در جامعه میخواهد برای همه عصرها و همه قرون انسانها را در وادی شناخت و معرفت و در وادی رشد و ترقی قرار بدهد. جنس مجلس امام حسین و نوع عزای حسینی و نحوه و شیوه عزاداری برای امام حسین علیه السلام و مجالس امام حسین، نزورات و تبرکاتی که در این مجالس هست با سایر مجالس متفاوت است. نقل است که یک گنجشک خرد وقتی که حضرت ابراهیم علیه السلام توسط نمرود به آتش افکنده شد، یک گنجشک آب می آورد. یک بار به اصطلاح عامیانه جبرائیل طاقتش سر آمد، سوال کرد، در همان منطق سوال کرد که تو دیگه از آب آوردن تو با این نوک منقار خورده توی چی درد دوام میشه؟ این گنجشک با همان منطق جواب داد میخواهم که در قیامت در زمره همراهان و یاران و اصحاب و دوستداران حضرت ابراهیم نبی علیه السلام و آله السلام قرار بگیرم. حالا هم من و شما هم تلاش میکنیم که با قرار گرفتن در چنین شرایطی و با قرار گرفتن در چنین مراسم و مجالسی بتوانیم در زمره دوستداران و محبین ابا عبدالله الحسین قرار بگیریم. مگر نه این است که پیامبر صلوات الله علیه و آله و سلم فرمود ان الحسن والحسین سیدا شباب اهل الجنه اذ قاما او قعدا. حسن و حسین هر دو سرور جوانان اهل بهشتن، چه به پا خیزن و قیام کنن و چه بنشینن و صلح کنن. و سایر سفارشاتی که از پیامبر گرامی اسلام صلوات الله علیه و آله و سلم درباره اهل البیتش و مخصوصاً این دو پاره تنش امام حسن و امام حسین علیهم السلام برای ما رسیده است. ما از شب اول در رابطه با این که واقعاً از خود سوال کنیم ما برای چی جمع میشیم، هدف ما چیست، عرض کردیم که دانشسرای و مکتب امام حسین علیه السلام ما را به رشد میرساند. و شب گذشته حدیثی را از مولا علی علیه السلام عرض کردیم که فرمود مردم سه دستند، یک عده می آموزند و یاد میگیرن، معرفت پیدا میکنن، علم پیدا میکنن و آن را در جهت رضای خداوند تبارک و تعالی به کار میگیرن. اینان العالم ربانیون، انبیای الهی، اولیاء، اوصیا، شهدا و علمای ربانی در این زمره هستند. اما دسته دوم و المتعلم علی سبیل النجاح، کسانی هستند که همواره تلاش میکنن خود را در مسیر نجات قرار بدهند. حالا مسیرهای نجات متفاوت است، مسیرهای نجات در زندگی متفاوت است. شما شنیدین که خیلی کسان شاید عقیده راسخی به شریعت الهی ندارن اما اهل خوبی هستن، خوبی میکنن، تلاششان این است که بدیشان به کسی نرسد. این هم یک راهی است. و افرادی در میان جامعه بشر هستند که تلاش میکنن با علم آموزی و دانش آموزی برای بشر خدمت کنن. این هم یک راه است برای نجات. خیلی کسان تلاش میکنن که در جامعه از جنایت، از جرم، از بدی، از پلشتی جلوگیری شود. این هم یک راه نجات هست. خلاصه افراد بشر به طرق مختلف تلاش میکنن که راههای نجات را پیدا کنن، که در این باره یکی از دانشمندان بزرگ جهان اسلام به نام ملا صدرای شیرازی یا صدر المتأهلین انسانها را به 5 دسته تقسیم میکنه. به 5 دسته تقسیم میکنه. کتابی دارد به نام شواهد الربوبیه. در این کتاب در یک بخشی ایشان در رابطه با معرفت و شناخت انسانها را به 5 دسته تقسیم میکنه. دسته اول محسوسات، یعنی کسانی که خطر را حس میکنن و مثال میزنن مثل پروانه، فقط حس میکنن خیلی چیزها را. پروانه را دیدین وقتی که علاقه داره به روشنایی و مخصوصا علاقه داره به آن شعله شمع و نزدیک میشه، یک بار پرش میسوزه باز دور میره، اما چون تصور ذهنی نداره دوباره به آتش نزدیک میشه، آنقدر خود به اصطلاح پر خود میزنه که از بین میره و میمیره. فقط در حد محسوسات. بعضی از انسان ها هسته که خوبی را فقط در اون حد که هیچ نوع تصور ذهنی نداره درک میکنه و گاهی اوقات نزدیک میشه، یا خطر را فقط در همان اندازه‌ای که در حقیقت حس میکنه درک میکنه و هیچ تصور ذهنی نداره. فلانجا یک خطر است، میای یک بار دوباره تصور نداره، جدا میشه، دوباره باز به همون خطر مواجه میشه تا اینکه از بین میره. و مثال عادیش برای امروز ما کسانی که معتاد هستند به الکل یا به خیلی چیزهای دیگه، میدانه که ضرر داره و برایش بد است، هر بار گرفتار اون میشه تا اینکه از بین میره. دسته دوم آدم ها آنهایی هستند که در حقیقت متخیلاتن، یعنی خیال میکنن، یک تصوری را دارن و ملا صدرا یک مثال میزند که اینها مانند یک کبوتر است که وقتی یک خطر حس کرده تلاش میکنه که دوباره به اون جای بر نگرده. مثلا ما و شما دیدیم یک پرنده یک جایی که اگر باشه، اگر کسی سنگ زده باشه، احساس خطر کرده باشه، دفعه دوم اونجا نمیره. اینا در حقیقت این دست از انسان ها فقط با مخیلاتشان هستن. مثلا از فلان دوست، از فلان رفیق، از فلان فامیلشان یک خاطره بدی دارن، دیگه سعی نمیکنن که او را فراموش بکنن. همیشه در تصور ذهنیشان است که فلانی به ما یک بدی کرده، دیگه من طرفش نمیرم. اینها در مخیلات زندگی میکنن، اینها در یک خیالات زندگی میکنن. اما دسته سومی که این عالم و دانشمند بزرگ جهان اسلام که هم فقیه است، هم متکلم است و هم فیلسوف است در قرن 11 و 12، میگوید دسته سوم کسانی است که توهماتی را دارند. یعنی اینها علاوه بر اینکه یک تصور ذهنی را دارند، اینها قبل از اینکه خطر برشان برسه در حقیقت سعی میکنه که از او جای بگریزن، یعنی ترک کنن اون جای را. اینها هم مثالش مانند آهو. ملا صدرا در این کتاب شواهد ربوبیه میگه مانند آهوست. آهو را شما ببینین هنوز به اصطلاح خطر به اون نرسیده، وقت میگریزه، فرار میکنه. داریم خیلی کسانی که این قوه وهمشان قوی است، یعنی این احساسشان قوی است که علاوه بر تصور ذهنی قبل از اینکه خطر برشان برسه او محیط ترک میکنن و هیچ وقت سعی نمیکنن خود را در این محیط خطر قرار بدن. اما دسته چهارم از انسانها کسانی هستند که در حقیقت اینها تعقل میکنن، فکر میکنن، میاندیشن، که اینها را ملا صدرا در جمله انسانهای عقلگرا قرار میدهد که اینها در زندگی هم خطر را میشناسند و هم فایده را میشناسند، هم خوبی را تشخیص میدهند، هم بدی را تشخیص میدهند و برای زندگیشان برنامه ریزی دارند، فکر میکنند، میاندیشند که چگونه زندگی کنند. و اما دسته پنجم عزیزان که این دانشمند بزرگ این دسته را عالی ترین گروه از جامعه بشری برمی شمارد. میگوید اینها کسانی هستند که علاوه بر عقلانیت اینها باورمندند به نیروی ماورایی انسان، به متافیزیک، به روحانیت انسان و اینکه انسان نیازی بالاتر از عقل نیز دارد و آن وحی و شریعت است. خب اگر در میان جامعه امروز ما دقت کنیم تاریخ نقلی، تاریخ علمی و تاریخ فلسفی بشریت مورد بررسی قرار بدیم، شما میبینید مکاتب فکری مانند مارکسیسم، کمونیسم، اومانیسم، اتئیسم، همه اینها عقلگرا هستند، فکر میکنن، میاندیشن. کسانی که رویاروی حسین ابن علی علیه السلام قرار گرفتن اینها همه اهل فکر بودن، میاندیشیدن، به اصطلاح عامیانه ضرر و زیان خود تشخیص میدادن در این عالم دنیا. مثلا عمر ابن سعد خیلی دوست داشت که هم امام حسین را داشته باشند و هم به حکومت به اصطلاح شهر ری و بعد شهرت برسد. مثلا عبیدالله ابن حر جحفی که شب گذشته هم عرض کردیم، اینها هم احترام فرزند رسول خدا را داشتن، هم میخواستن که واقعا در دنیایشان هم صاحب مقام و شهرتی باشن. عجیب است. خب وقتی که اینها را ما مورد بررسی قرار میدیم، میبینیم که این مکتبه های عقلگرا درست است که تلاش میکنن که برای زندگی دنیای بشر در حقیقت یک برنامه داشته باشن، یک پلتفرم داشته باشن، یک به اصطلاح عامیانه راهنما داشته باشه که بتواند پیش بره. اما بنا به عقاید و باورمندی های ما و بنا به ایدئولوژی اسلامی و ایدئولوژی الهی، فلسفه بعثت انبیاء الهی همین است که انسان بتواند تعقلی داشته باشد، بتواند عقلانیتی داشته باشد که او را به سعادت دنیا و آخرت برساند، که او را بتواند به سعادت دنیا و آخرت برساند. لذا برای همین است که امام علی علیه السلام فرمود مردم در یکی از این سه دسته قرار میگیرن: یا عالم ربانیان، یعنی می آموزن، فکر میکنن، خردورزن، می اندیشن و نسبت به علمشان معاملهشان با خداوند تبارک و تعالی است. یعنی اینها وحی و شریعت الهی را میپذیرند، آنچه که باعث سعادت آنها در دنیا و آخرت میشه. دسته دوم و المتعلم علی سبیل النجاة، کسانی که خود را در مسیر نجات قرار میدن که انشاءالله دعا میکنیم که ما حداقل در دسته دوم باشیم. صلوات ختم کنیم. و المتعلم علی سبیل النجاة، مثالی که یکی از دانشمندان بزرگ جهان اسلام علامه طباطبایی میزند این است. ایشان میفرمایند مثال کسانی که در مسیر نجات هستند مانند زمینی است که اگر ما یک مقدار او زمین بکاویم یا به اصطلاح عامیانه شخم بزنیم به آب میرسیم، و چون این زمینی که چون به اصطلاح یک مقدار کاویده میشه به آب میرسه، زمینای اطراف خود را هم سیراب خواهد کرد. یعنی کسانی که در مسیر نجات قرار میگیره یک مقدار لازم هست که در حقیقت زحمت بکشه، یک مقدار لازم هست که تلاش کند. لذا در دستگاه امام حسین علیه السلام در طول تاریخ کسانی که با این اندیشه و تعقل آمدن که بتوانند در مسیر جستجوی حقیقت به سعادت برسن به خود زحمت دادن، مانند زهیر ابن قین که دکتر صاحب شکیل بزرگوار در رابطه با داستان واقعه کربلا گریزی داشتن در رابطه با زهیر ابن قین. در مسیری که امام حسین علیه السلام حرکت میکرد که شما بارها و بارها شنیدید و ظرافتهای واقعه کربلا را از زاویه‌های مختلف مورد بررسی قرار دادید. زهیر ابن قین در زمره کسانی بود که با اهل البیت پیامبر میانه خوبی نداشتن. میانه خوبی نداشتن، یا به اصطلاح عامیانه هیچ نوع ارتباطی با اهل البیت نداشتن، یا بهتر است که بگیم حتی زاویه داشتن. اما وقتی که از حج برمیگشت و امام علیه السلام که آرام آرام منزل به منزل میرفت، خب کاروان زهیرم قرار گرفت. بالاخره امام علیه السلام سوال کرد که این کاروانی که از ما جدا میره اینها کی هستن؟ قاصد فرستاد و قاصد برگشت گفت که کسی که در این کاروان هست زهیر ابن قین است، اهل کوفه است، برمیگرده به کوفه. امام علیه السلام دوباره قاصد فرستاد که من میخواهم تو را ببینم. در روایت داریم که چند مرتبه امام علیه السلام شما محبت و بزرگواری اهل البیت پیامبر را ببینید، چند مرتبه، یعنی از یک بار امام حسین ناامید نشد، یا به اصطلاح نگفت که من فرزند رسول خدا یک بار قاصد فرستادم، دو بار قاصد فرستادم، چرا یک کس نیامد، چرا یک قدر مغرور است. نه، امام حسین علیه السلام تلاش کرد. وقتی نمیدانم چند مرتبه رفت، بالاخره خانم زهیر ابن قین یک تشری، یک نهیبی، یک فریادی بر شوهرش زد، گفت که خجالت نمیکشی؟ فرزند پیامبر حسین ابن علی تو را خواسته، حداقل برو ببین که چی میگه. که در تاریخ داریم با یک مرتبه دیدار زهیر ابن قین با امام حسین علیه السلام نمیدانیم چه گفتگویی بین امام و زهیر گذشت که زهیر وقتی برگشت با چهره بسیار به اصطلاح عامیانه دلکشال رفت، اما وقتی برگشت چهرهش نورانی، قلبش نورانی و تمام وجودش را عشق فرا گرفته بود و با خانمش گویا این گونه گفت خب خانم، من دیگه شما را به خدا سپردم، شما آزاد هستین، برین، من با حسین ابن علی خواهم بود. اینجا این خانمش که نقش خواهران ما، نقش بانوان در جامعه چقدر برجسته است. در قیام عاشورا، در نهضت حسینی شما میبینید که چقدر خواهران در دستگاه امام حسین علیه السلام، از زینب کبرا تا بسیاری از بانوان اهل حرم و اصحاب امام حسین علیه السلام حضور داشتند. و مخصوصا خانم زهیر ابن قین که جواب میده ای زهیر، حالا که من به اصطلاح تو رو تشویق کردم که برو فرزند رسول خدا را ببین، تو میخوایی مرا تنها بگذاری؟ مگه میشه که من در کنار زینب سلام الله علیها نباشم؟ خب این نکته بسیار ظریفی است برای همه ما و شما که بنده حقیر در همین منبر حسینی عرض میکنم که این حقیر هر چه دارم از برکت مادر مرحومه ماست. خوشنودی ارواح همه اموات صلوات. و همه شما عزیزان میدانید که در کنار هر مرد موفقی یک خانم فداکار و بزرگوار است و ما مدیون مادران دلسوز و گرانقدر خود هستیم. و ما اگر این مجالس را داریم از برکات مادران ماست که واقعا از طفولیت و کودکی و نونهالی برای همه من این ذکر حقیقی و این ذکر واقعی الهی را یاد دادن و از کودکی وقتی که به ما شیر میدادن و وضو میگرفتن همواره ذکرشان و در حقیقت لالاییشان اهل البیت پیامبر علیهم السلام برای ما بوده و ما مدیونشان هستیم. خب شخصیت مانند زهیر ابن قین و خانوادهش این گونه به امام حسین علیه السلام می پیونده. و اما کسانی را داریم که امام حسین علیه السلام خیلی تلاش کرد اما آنها متاسفانه نخواستن. نه اینکه نتوانسته باشه عزیزان، نکته اینجاست، آنها می توانستن اما نخواستن در کنار امام علیه السلام قرار بگیرن. چرا؟ همان حرف ملا صدرا، اینها یا در محسوسات بودن که فقط حس میکردن خطر را، آمدن زیر گلوی ابا عبدالله الحسین را بوسیدن، گفتن یا حسین ما حس میکنیم خطر را، نرو که تو کشته میشی. اما امام علیه السلام برای اینها چی جوابی داد؟ من خواهم رفت، چرا این وعده حق تعالی است و من مسئولیت دارم در قبال جامعه. و علی الاسلام السلام اذ قد بلیت بمثل یزید برای هذه الامه. دیگه باید فاتحه اسلام را بخوانیم وقتی که شخصی مانند یزید و شخصیت مانند یزید بر گرده مردم سوار شود و خود را جانشین پیامبر بنامد. عجیب است. مردم شنیدن صدای حسین ابن علی علیه السلام را، مردم دیدن که حسین ابن علی از مدینه جدش حرکت کرد به مکه، 4 ماه و اندی در مکه بود. مردم شنیدن سخنان حسین ابن علی علیه السلام را. با توجه به که وقت اذان نزدیک است، ان شاء الله تعالی ذکر مصیبت و توسل مختصری خواهیم داشت و ان شاء الله تعالی به استقبال اذان مغرب خواهیم رفت و از همه شما عزیزان التماس دعا دارم و ان شاء الله ادامه بحث در شب‌های آینده در محضر شما خواهیم بود. بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. یکی از یاران گرانقدر ابا عبدالله الحسین علیه السلام که همه ما و شما به او ارادت داریم و امشب میخواهیم به او توسل کنیم، حر ابن یزید ریاحی است. همانطوری که عزیز دل ما دکتر صاحب شکیل در سخنرانی انگلیسی فرمودن که چه واقعی به وقوع پیوست وقتی که امام علیه السلام به غازریه رسید و حر آمد، راه را بر امام علیه السلام بست و همان گفتگوی اولیه‌ای که بین حر و امام اتفاق افتاد و آن محبت امام علیه السلام در دل و ذهن حر بیشتر نشست وقتی که اسبها سیراب شد، وقتی که حر پشت امام و یاران حر پشت امام علیه السلام نماز خواندند. اینها همه حکایت از این است که پیامبر صلوات الله علیه و آله و سلم فرمود کسی که ادب دارد و کسی که حیا دارد به دینش امیدوار خواهیم بود. لا دین لمن لا ادب له، لا دین لمن لا حیا له. حر به سبب حیاش، به سبب ادبش نجات پیدا کرد. لذا عزیزان امروز حر در مرحله قرار دارد که امت اسلام به او توسل میکنن، به او توجه میکنن، چرا که او مورد عنایت فرزند رسول خدا قرار گرفته است. آری عزیزان، حر کسی است که راه را بر امام علیه السلام بست. به تعبیر خودش در روز عاشورا وقتی که با فرزندش برگشت، حتی چکمه هایش را بر روی دوش خود گرفت، آمد خیلی پشیمان، خیلی پشیمان و سلام داد. السلام علیک یا ابا عبدالله، ای فرزند رسول خدا، ما آمدم پشیمانم. ای فرزند رسول خدا، من راه را بر شما بستم، من دل زینب را غمگین ساختم، من دل زینب را رزاندم، من دل اهل و عیال شما را رزاندم. همین حر آمد نزد امام علیه السلام، شاید هم در دلش امیدی نداشت، اما امام علیه السلام حر را در آغوش گرفت، رویش را بوسید
و فرمود ای حر خوش آمدی ای حر. حر دیگه توان صحبت را نداشت و گفت یا ابا عبدالله به من اجازه میدان بده، میخواهم اولین کسی باشم که جان خود را در راه دین، در راه رسول خدا و شما فدا کنم. صلی الله علیکم یا انصار دین الله، صلی الله علیکم یا اصحاب حسین ابن علی. هر با غمین ندامت و پشیمانی نزد ابا عبدالله رسید. چشمان بر زمین دوخته گویا خیلی پشیمان است. خودش میگوید ابن رسول الله خود را بین بهشت و جهنم میبینم. با خود فکر کردم آیا رسول خدا، آیا فرزند علی و زهرا مرا میبخشن یا نه؟ یک بار امام هر را در آغوش گرفت. یا ابا عبدالله ما آمدیم خیلی پشیمانیم. یا ابا عبدالله هر چه کردیم پشیمانیم. آمدیم به امیدی که شما عزیز درگاه خدایید، هر را پذیرفتید، به او اجازه میدان دادید. هر به میدان رفت و جانان رزمید تا لحظه ای که از به زمین افتاد. اصلا تصور نمی کرد که مولایش آقایش ابا عبدالله بیاید سر او را به بالین بگذارد و بر روی زانویش قرار بدهد. سر هر به دامن ابا عبدالله، هر چشمانش را باز کرد، دید ابا عبدالله دست مبارکش را بر پیشانی هر گذاشته، خون از پیشانی هر پاک نموده. فرمود ای هر چه خوش نامید مادرت، نام تو را هر گذاشت. انت حران فی هذه الدنیا و فی الاخره. آری عزیزان این همان هر است که وقتی که امام فرمود سکلت که امک، مادرت به عزایت بنشیند، زبان به کام فرو بست و گفت ابن رسول الله تو فرزند زهرایی. این عقیده و این ادب او را نجات داد. سر هر به بالین امام چه سعادتی از خدایا. هر در این لحظه چگونه تشکری کرد از امام. گفت ابن رسول الله در این لحظاتی که به زودی به جد شما می پیوندم، این محبت شما را فراموش نمی کنم. بنازم به یاران ابا عبدالله که تا آخرین لحظات شهادتشان این گونه شکرگزار و سپاسگزار بودن. اما لایم که یومک یا ابا عبدالله، بمیرم بر آن لحظه ای که هیچ کس نبود، وقتی که در گودال قتلگاه قرار گرفتی، نه تنها کسی سرت را به دامن نگذاشت که سرت را بر روی خاک، اما بر روی سینه چه سنگینی از آن شمر لعین که الا لعنة الله علی القوم الظالمین و سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. نسألك اللهم وندعو باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك، يا حميد بحق محمد، يا غالي بحق علي، يا فاطر بحق فاطمة، يا محسن بحق الحسن، يا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين، وتسعة المعصومين من ولد الحسين. اللهم اقض لنا حوائجنا الشرعية دنيوية وأخروية، ظاهرية وباطنية، كلية وجزئية، بحق محمد وآله خير البرية. جهت شفای همه بیماران، برآورده شدن حوائج، صلح و امنیت در سرتاسر عالم، به ویژه برای کافه امت اسلامی و ملت مظلوم من در افغانستان، خوشنودی ارواح جمیع اموات، قبولی این محافل و مجالس. رحم الله لمن قرأ السورة المباركة الفاتحة مع